This show will be discussing a different perspective on African liberation and the issues concerning African people. Before I begin, I just want to lay down a few concepts. First concept: African people are black people. So you will not hear me saying black people or black Africans very much. I will be saying Africans, because we are the indigenous people, not only on the planet but on the continent referred to as Afrika. Anyone else on that continent who is not of our phenotype is an invader, a colonizer, an enslaver, an immigrant seeking economic opportunities. And I don't care how long they've been there, that does not make them African, and they are not. They are foreigners that for whatever reason have left their ancient homeland and implanted themselves in Africa to exploit Africans. This show, the ACBN show, is a show that is based in the ideology, the only ideology that will save African people: African-centered biological nationalism, ACBN. We have a lot of pretenders out here. People who are posing as African-centered or Afrocentric, or people who care about African people, and they're writing a lot of books, teaching in some of the finest Eurocentric universities. They are giving a lot of lectures, touring, making YouTube videos and blog talk radio shows. But what constitutes an African-centered biological nationalist? What is an African? Exactly whom are we trying to save? Are we trying to save people who identify as Africans? Are we trying to save white people? Or are we trying to save the original man and woman, the people who represent the parent of civilization? Are we trying to save these white people who are claiming that they're African, who have stolen land in Azania and Zimbabwe? Or these white people who work in universities that for centuries and were founded with the intention of expropriating land, resources, and wealth from African people, like Oxford, where you have this white man named Richard Dawkins, who's running around the globe making YouTube videos and giving lectures saying that we are all African because of some theory that he's promoting, that one of his white countrymen came up with. There's another one of his white cohorts in this movement, a so-called Jew that's living in Los Angeles, sexually sewering African women as a hobby, and he promotes it unashamedly. That is trying to say all people are African. His name, Bill Maher. Some of you like him. You think he's a liberal. You think he's okay. Who are the Africans? Who are they? Okay? Are Africans people who don't look African but identify with Africa because white people won't let them say they're white? Like your President of the United States, Barack Obama. People say he's a son of Africa. How can he be a son of Africa if he was gestating in a womb of a white woman for 9 months. How could that even be? Who is an African? That's the question this show will be exploring within the framework of the ideology of African-centered biological nationalism. Are Africans mulattoes? Are Africans Indians that were brought to Africa by the British? Are Africans Europeans that came and colonized and terrorized African people and stole their land, but have been there so long they don't remember their country of origin, so they claim they're African too? Are Africans Arabs who came in colonizing, terrorizing, destabilizing nations on the continent and have now set up nations in the post-colonial, have set up nation states in the post-colonial era, and now are claiming to be African and are accepted into institutions like the African Union and have imposed their foreign language on people? You know it as Arabic. And have imposed their foreign religion on people. You know it as Islam. Who is an African? Is Halle Berry an African? Huh? These are questions that have to be answered. How can we say that Mariah Carey is an African? Look at her. We have to start dealing with this question. The time is now. We have to define who is an African and who is not. Who are the Africans? Well, I view Africans as people who possess the phenotypical characteristics of the indigenous people of Africa, originating in the Zimbabwe, Congo, Ugandan Great Lakes area, and who migrated over time all over the continent. They have deep brown to dark brown skin tone upon sight that is rich and profuse with melanin. They have African textured hair that is not straight, not wavy, not curly, but tightly coiled, which is resistant to light physical force such as wind, and grows up and out from the head. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, what about these albinos? Albinos are a genetic illness that is not representative of what African men and women reproduce. So we recognize them as Africans with a genetic illness. So who are the other people on the globe, you ask? They're not Africans. They are hybridized Homo sapiens. And that's not a diss, it's fact. The most hybridized group of people on the planet are the so-called white people. People who call themselves white. So we have a lot of confused Africans out here who think they can fuck racism away, who think that they can have sex with non-African people, produce hybridized children, and at some point there's going to be a coffee-colored reality with, which I hate that term, I should say caramel colored reality, because coffee is black unless you put milk and some other ingredient in the coffee. So they want to produce a so-called caramel colored reality, and they think that will end racism. But they don't understand genetics, because if they understood genetics, they would know that the white people are the most hybridized people on the planet, and the end result of hybridization is not a caramel colored population, it's white people. And it's the disintegration of the African phenotype. So I ask again, who is an African? Who are we trying to save? Who are we trying to empower? What culture, what civilization needs to undergo a renaissance and seek power and have powerful institutions and have influence and force in the world to maintain and impose their view of reality? It's not Chris Brown and Rihanna. It's not some hybridized, oh, I've got a great-grandfather who was Chinese, and I think on my mother's side there's some Indian in my family, and oh, you know, I'm part white because, you know, I had a cousin. None of that. We're trying to save African people. And African people are the people that I have defined in that way. And every institution, every ideological approach must be based in that reality. The purpose of the ACBN show is to promote this viewpoint, to teach and to discuss pertinent information, to explain and defend this viewpoint. We want to expose people who claim they're African and then run and marry and have children with mulattoes, like Uhuru Kenyatta, the president of Kenya, whose ancestors were brutally and savagely subjugated by Europeans. And he has betrayed his ancestors by marrying a mulatto and making her the first lady of that nation. That is a betrayal. Ouattara of Cote d'Ivoire, who has married a white woman and has made a white woman the woman from the group of people that have enslaved his people systematically for centuries, and has made this white woman the first lady of Senegal, of Cote d'Ivoire. But I say Senegal, I slipped, because Senegal has its first African first lady in its post-colonial history. Every other African man has married a white woman and placed her upon the throne of Senegal. These nations are not free because they are culturally orientated towards foreign cultures. This is why we need ACBN, to promote the image of Africans in leadership. Not foreigners, not foreign ideologies, African ideologies. African people as a distinct people on the planet. And this will consolidate our mental processes so that we can act as a force in the world and protect our interests, so that we can define our interests. Because once we know what an African is, who an African is, we can then say these are the people we're protecting, and these are the people who are going to benefit from our programs and policies and institutions, and they will be in leadership in the institutions, provided they are married to an African man or African woman of the opposite sex, because we don't support homosexuality like you degenerates out there. This is about the continuation of the African genome. So, I want to thank you for listening to our first show. This is a very short and sweet show, which we will be expanding upon later. But suffice it to say, this is one of the core, if not the core, essential questions of the 21st century. Who is an African? Thank you for listening.